everybody? This is Tyler here once again from the Character Workshop, and welcome to be honest, I don't really have a special little intro for this one, but you know what? It's the Season 7 finale of A Cave from England, so I guess I can say that. Welcome to the Season 7 finale of A Cave from England. Alright, there we go. There's my special intro out of the way. Anyways, so for this last episode of the season, we are going to be taking a look at another Doctor Who story from the classic era. This one's pretty interesting because, just like the Reign of Terror, which I covered last season, this is another story that has missing episodes. However, unlike the Reign of Terror, which had its 2 missing episodes animated, this one I'm going to be talking about does not have an animation right now. They are, however, available in telesnap reconstructions on the Season 2 box set right here. And of course, if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, I am talking about story number 6 of Season 2, which is overall the 14th story of Doctor Who, The Crusade. So, the story of The Crusade is as follows. Basically, the Doctor, Vicky, Ian, and Barbara land in the 12th century Palestine during the Third Crusade, and basically they get themselves caught up in the middle of a Saracen ambush, and in confusion, Barbara gets seized by one of the Saracen members from behind, while the rest of the crew basically stop the attackers from killing an associate of King Richard I by the name of William de Tournebo. Sorry, might have mispronounced his name. I'm probably going to mispronounce a lot of these guys' names, so keep that in mind. So, after Barbara gets captured, she meets another guy by the name of William de Prow, who basically gets mistaken for King Richard I. And both Barbara and him were presented to Saladin, who's basically the brother of the ruler of Egypt and Syria, Saladin, by basically a member of the palace, Elakir. I told you, I'm probably going to mispronounce a lot of these names. And as I mentioned earlier, they did mistake William and Barbara for King Richard and his sister, Lady Joanna. And when William does reveal who they really are, Elakir gets furious, and before he's able to act upon his rage, Saladin himself finally appears and is basically intrigued by Barbara, and he basically invites her to entertain him with her stories during supper. At King Richard's palace, Ian, who really wants Barbara to be rescued, asks for King Richard's help. However, he tells Ian that Barbara can remain with Saladin until her death. De Tournebo and the Doctor are able to eventually convince the king to be able to change his mind. Afterwards, Ian gets knighted and becomes Sir Ian Chesterton of Jaffa. And he also gets served as basically an emissary, and he gets sent to Saladin's court to request the release of William de Prow and Barbara, and to offer a hand of, the actual Lady Joanna in marriage to Saladin in order to create peace. This, of course, makes Joanna pretty mad when she heard that King Richard is trying to get her to marry Saladin, and she gets irritated and refuses to do it. Ian, during his quest, basically delivers a message to Saladin, after which, he grants Ian to leave to search for Barbara. And during Ian's search, he gets attacked by bandits and gets knocked out. And one of the bandits by the name of Ibrahim basically ties him down and stakes him in the hot sun and basically daubs him with honey, basically trying to get him killed by vultures, basically. So, meanwhile, with Barbara, she basically escapes from Elakir twice, but of course gets recaptured both times. And one of the first times she, escaped capture, she was hiding out in basically Emir's harem on the second occasion, and basically Elakir tries to basically find Barbara, but she is hidden by basically a harem girl by the name of Maimuna. Once again, as I've mentioned before, sorry for mispronouncing a lot of these names. Meanwhile, while Ian is still trapped, he eventually tricks Ibrahim to untying his feet and basically overpowers him and basically is no longer under his custody. Ian then eventually like convinces Ibrahim to help him out to get to Lida to basically save Barbara. Meanwhile, Elakir bursts in and is about to attack Barbara, while another guy by the name of Haruan, God, anyway, basically a man who aided Barbara with the shelter earlier, basically arrives and stabs Elakir. After not too long later, Ian then arrives and helps, Haruan, get rid of the guards, and then Haruan gets reunited with his daughter that I mentioned earlier, and him and Barbara then leave to go towards the TARDIS. And then the Doctor, in the meantime, during this whole period of time, who has been avoiding involvement in court politics, attempts to, make a break for the TARDIS. He then gets caught by the Earl of Leicester, who thinks that the Doctor is a spy for Saladin, and basically sentences him to death. Ian then shows up and basically presented himself as Sir Ian of Jaffa, and tells the Earl of Leicester to that he will carry out the execution of the Doctor himself, which of course was a lie. So the Doctor then asks for one last chance to see Jaffa before he dies, and then the Earl of Leicester agrees, and then the Doctor is able to sneak away into the TARDIS with, Vicky, Ian, and Barbara, and they make their way out of the Crusade, the third Crusade. So yeah, that was basically the plots of the Crusade, and I gotta say, pretty decent story. Nothing really spectacular like we've had, for basically most of Season 2. I will say Crusade, in my opinion, is still better than, like, the last story I reviewed, Web Planet. I don't think anything can really beat Web Planet in terms of how bad that was. At least I think so far. Anyways, so the Crusade, pretty good. I liked it. Going into this, I wasn't aware that this Crusade took place in the 12th century. I figured this was gonna, take place, near the future, because as soon as I've heard information about this story, prior to watching it, and I've heard of a character named King Richard, and I'm like, is that King Richard the Fourth? Because, not too long ago, I rewatched Blackadder, and, Series 1 of Blackadder, which is simply called The Blackadder, features King Richard the Fourth, and I thought that would have been the same King Richard, but no, this is like an earlier descendant of King Richard, the very first one to be exact. But yeah, it's good. I definitely like the performances of the guest characters, especially the actors who played King Richard and Lady Joanna, who I actually looked up. Apparently both actors who have played these characters are still alive, King Richard the First, by the way, was played by Julian Glover, and Lady Joanna was played by Jean Marsh, and Jean Marsh would actually go on to, be in other Doctor Who stories later on. And bit of a fun fact about Jean Marsh, for anybody who's ever watched The Twilight Zone, she was actually in one of the first season episodes called The Lonely. So, yeah, I think probably the only time I would say that Doctor Who and The Twilight Zone have something in common when it comes to behind the scenes. And the thing that kind of ruins the Crusade a little bit for me, is obviously due to the fact that, like, episodes 2 and 4 of the Crusade are missing. That's something I forgot to bring up earlier in the episode, but yeah, it's a 4-part story, and only parts 1 and 3 exist. So yeah, parts 2 and 4, they don't exist, and as I mentioned earlier, they weren't animated, unfortunately. And I've heard from, like, various, like, people who work on the Doctor Who animations that, like, basically they think the Crusade would have been hard to animate because of, all the different characters and costumes and stuff, but, like, they don't have to animate the whole story. Like, episodes 1 and 3 already exist. Just, if you're gonna do an animation for it, just do 2 and 4, since they're missing, and, yeah, you don't need to do a color version of them, because, like, what's the point of doing them in color if, like, the surviving episodes are not in color? Just, do them in black and white. Anyways, that tangent out of the way. But yeah, I definitely love the surviving episodes. When it came to the Blu-ray box set for Season 2, which had the Crusade on there, obviously, there's actually multiple ways to watch it. You can watch just the surviving episodes, 1 and 3. Also, when the story first came out on VHS, I believe, long time ago, I believe this was, it was in 1999, basically around the same time when, Episode 1 was recovered, because Episode 1 was lost for a while up until, like, 24 years ago. But yeah, on that VHS tape, which was also, you know, featured on the Blu-ray box set, there's actually a, basically, little inserts in between episodes 1 and 3 and after episode 3, basically with William Russell coming back as Ian to, like, you know, kind of, like, reminiscent about his time on, the Crusade, like, as Ian, you know, he's in character, you know, recounting these events, you know, with episodes 2 and 4, which I've mentioned are missing, so that's an option you can watch. And obviously the version I went with on the Blu-ray is just watching episodes 2 and 4 reconstructed with surviving photographs and obviously the audio existing. So, yep. Which, by the way, there's also an option to, like, you know, watch the reconstructed episodes with, like, info text about, like, you know, what's going on in the story, because obviously with photos you can't tell what the characters are doing in terms of movements. So they got those things in there, which I would recommend. If you were to watch this on the box set yourself, I'd recommend watching those reconstructed episodes with those info texts for, like, you know, the more action scenes, I guess you would call it. And speaking of action, that's something that this story kind of lacks in a lot of ways. You know, there isn't really a whole much, like, going on in terms of action, really. Like, obviously the closest we got was the very end where, like, you know, Ella Kier gets, you know, killed, and, you know, obviously that beginning scene where, like, the Doctor and his crew, like, you know, are in the middle of that ambush. That's kind of about it. You know, not a whole lot really happens or is really suspenseful. I mean, if anything, the last historical story we had, which was the Romans, you know, had more interesting stuff going on, despite being more humorous in tone. Yeah, the Romans had a lot more, you know, interesting stuff, like especially that one scene in that story where Ian was forced to fight somebody. But yeah, those are the two things that kind of drag the Crusade down for me a little bit. The fact that 2 of the episodes are missing and are not animated, and also the fact that just wasn't super interesting in my opinion. Not bad or anything, definitely better than Web Planets, but, like, still not amazing or anything. I will say, obviously, it's, you know, as with most Doctor Who stories except for Web Planets, the Doctor and the Companions do really good in this. I really like it. And something I've kind of noticed a lot when it comes to, like, you know, watching these past few Season 2 stories, especially since Vicky was introduced. I think it's interesting how, there's, like, a lot of moments in there where it's just the Doctor and Vicky interacting with each other, rather than, you know, all 4 of them together, I guess, which I think is kind of interesting, I will say. And it just kind of shows that, like, you know, those two kind of have, like, kind of a bond. Not necessarily the same strong bond that Susan had with the Doctor, but, you know, still strong regardless. And, you know, Ian and Barbara, good as always. Definitely a lot of stuff for Barbara to do since, you know, most of the story she was just by herself. So, obviously, Barbara's good. Yeah, Vicky I liked. There was a portion of the story where, like, I think the people in King Richard's palace thought that Vicky was a boy, and, you know, they eventually found out that she was a girl later on, and, you know, gave her a different outfit to wear, which is interesting. The Doctor and Ian, of course, are good as usual. Not much else to say about that. But I will say about the Doctor, I do like the one portion in episode 1 where he basically, like, you know, I guess found a clever way to, like, you know, kind of take clothes away from a merchant to, like, you know, put on himself and his companions to, like, you know, make sure they disguise very well in the 12th century. Yeah, obviously, you know, the main cast, great as always. But other than that, I think that's all I gotta say about the Crusade. It's, you know, an alright story. Not the worst story of Season 2 so far, but definitely not the best for me. Great casting. Just wish it was more kind of like action-packed in a way. But, you know, seeing that it's from the 12th century, I guess, you know, I shouldn't really be expecting much. So, with that being said, I guess I'll just give the Crusade a rating of 7 out of 10. So yeah, that was the end of my discussion and review of the Crusade. Yeah, I do really wish that there were animated versions of episodes 2 and 4, which I feel like would have made my impression of the story a little bit better, but for the time being, it stands as it stands. Maybe if they ever do animate episodes 2 and 4 of Crusade, maybe my opinions will change. Who knows? But yeah, it was disappointing that they didn't, like, animate those episodes for the Season 2 box set. But, not much else to say. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to give it a like and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more episodes of A Game from England, or just me Nerd Plush content in general. And be sure to turn on a notification bell so you get notified each time I upload a new episode of A Game from England or any of my other shows. Leave a comment down below, let me know what you think. That is about it. This is Tyler from the Character Workshop, signing out. I almost screwed up my own name there for some reason. But anyways, stay tuned for Season 8, where in the first episode of Season 8, we are going to review, well, another Doctor Who story from Season 2. This time, we are apparently going to be in a museum in space. Alright, let's go again.